Hey ladies and gentlemen, Christoph the Polish Geek, and welcome to the review of Civil War, because yes, I finally seen it, and I have to say, it was a great movie, and I had a really good time with it, and I very strongly recommend it. And the first thing I'll say is that trailers made it seem like this movie was going to be very action-packed, but no, it was actually very much a dialogue-heavy drama with some really intense action in it, but I really had a good time with it, and I thought action scenes were excellent, as was the dialogue and the very interesting and very thought-provoking story. First, I'll say I'm really also glad this movie chose to be apolitical, because the trailers made it seem, and some people were very concerned, this movie would be very one-sided politically. I mean, hard to blame anyone. I mean, it's Hollywood we are talking about, but I'm glad that actually wasn't the case, especially that election is coming this year in the fall, and there is going to be some really huge conflict between both sides. But I'm really glad this movie chose very much to be apolitical and not to really take sides, and I really have to applaud it for it, because again, it's Hollywood, so it's a miracle actually. And I've been saying a couple of times on this channel already that I lived in the United States for 8 years, and honestly my politics are very off-grid. It's really hard to define me. Really, the best way is probably somewhat a centrist, I guess, but really, I very much have huge problems with both the right and the left. I won't really get deep into it, but yeah, it's really hard to define my political views. I don't really read right or left, although I've been called by some people on the far left a fascist, but I also been called a communist by some on the far right a few times too. So yeah, it's really hard to define my political views, but I think both sides suck really, and I don't think any extremism is good, but unfortunately the way it seems it's going on, especially in America, that both sides are becoming very extreme. But we're getting a little off topic, but yeah, Civil War was a really great movie, and I'm so glad it chose to be mostly politically neutral and mostly exploring the general idea of what it could be like in the United States if the Civil War actually broke out. But it's also very much disturbing in some way, especially that some people believe that Civil War unfortunately is coming into the United States, although let's hope that won't be the case. But the movie also made me think actually, and this is one of those movies I honestly think that when I watch it again, I can get something completely new out of it, because that's actually one of the huge appeals of this movie. I think different people can get completely different interpretation or something completely different out of this movie, and that's really good filmmaking in my opinion. And one of the examples of where I think that the movie clearly doesn't take sides is the example of a president of the United States. I can't say he's portrayed sympathetically, quite not. He probably is the closest thing you have to a villain in the movie, but I've seen some people actually interpreting him as more like another victim of the Civil War as a whole, and just a guy who serves in office but doesn't basically know what to do with the country. But on the other hand, he's serving his third term, which he can do according to the Constitution. So other people interpret him as a dictator who kind of is basically responsible for the whole Civil War. But any interpretation works, and what's also good is that a political party he's part of isn't sad. Plus, he didn't give me vibes of any specific president. I mean, he kind of had elements of plenty of US presidents throughout history, but he didn't give me a vibe of any specific one, which is good. The main characters in this movie are actually a bunch of journalists who travel all the way to Washington DC to actually interview that aforementioned president, and on their way there they experience the various different effects of the Civil War and meet various different people, many of whom we don't even know who they fight for. And this is also one of those movies that at the end of the movie, it's really hard to tell at the end who really is a good guy at the end, because in all honesty, I can't say there is really any truly morally good person by the end of the movie. Because again, it's civil war. It's basically divided states of America, and also was disturbing, as I already said, that some people outright believe that America unfortunately is headed into civil war. And that's true. There is huge political division now in this country, although let's hope America is not headed into civil war. As the journalists travel across the United States and meet various people, as I already said, it's really hard to tell who is fighting for whom really, but this is kind of the point. Because there is civil war and divided states of America, and there aren't really good guys and bad guys, just a huge mess and people turning on against each other. Just a country torn by civil war. And also, among the many different characters that our journalists made, they meet, for example, innocent civilians who are torn by war and basically just try to live their personal lives as best as they can at this point. And then there are members of various different factions fighting each other, but again, as I already said, we can't really tell whom they're fighting for at this point. But then there are also some evil savages who just use the civil war to their advantage to just be bloodthirsty evil savages. And the perfect example of that is the character of Jesse Plemons. There is actually a scene with Jesse Plemons that's already very much talked about, and Jesse Plemons' character is probably the only character who, although he's named in the movie actually, but his character is probably the only character in the whole movie that I would call a embodiment of evil. The only character that's just pure evil. Because as I said, in the movie there aren't really good guys and bad guys, but this character is decidedly the only character who I would call straight up evil. And a scene in which he appears was actually extensively shown in the trailer, so even if you haven't seen the movie, you might probably already figure out who I'm talking about, because again, that scene with him was actually very extensively shown in the trailer. And I will say this, the justice that meets him actually is pretty poetic, because he kills many people and then dumps their body in a hole, and then he gets run over by a car and his dead body falls in the very same hole in which he was putting his dead body. So I like that attention to detail, that the justice that meets him was very poetic. Overall, I strongly recommend Civil War, and as I already been saying, I'm really happy this movie chose not to really take political sides or get any specific into politics, just again, United States torn by civil war, especially in the modern times where United States is unfortunately pretty divided politically. And if Dune Part 2 wasn't already proudly occupying this spot with unlikely anything to dethrone it, Civil War could be actually one of the contenders for the movie of the year, honestly. And also, maybe on rewatches I might get something completely new out of this movie, because again, as I said, this is one of those movies I think you can get something completely different out of upon a rewatch. And I know that some people got actually something different from this movie than I did. But again, I recommend Civil War, and I'm really glad I seen it. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for checking out this video. Press the like button, please subscribe this channel, and I will talk to you later in another video. Talk to you soon, bye!